What's up, fellow humans? Welcome back to the channel if you are a returning viewer, and if you're somebody new, then my name is Caleb, and this is where we document our slow and budget-friendly travels to different places around the world. Currently, I am here sitting in my apartment in Vung Tau, Vietnam. If you want to know more about Vung Tau as a city, or if you want to know how I live in Vietnam for only 600 USD a month, go ahead and check out some of the last few videos that we released on the channel. This video today is going to be for anybody who is curious about traveling in Latin America or Southeast Asia in 2025, and maybe you're wondering which one might be better for you. I've been in Southeast Asia for like the last 5 months, and I spent a couple years traveling in different parts of Latin America and have a lot of experience there. So I wanted to make a video comparing the two. Specifically, I want to go over a few different categories like cultural differences, landscape differences, and cost of living differences. Let's get right into it. The first thing I want to mention are some of the cultural differences between the two regions. If you're from a Western country like Europe or Canada or the United States, you're probably going to have an easier time integrating, for lack of a better word, into Latin America, especially maybe if you're from Spain and you already speak Spanish, or if you're from Portugal and you speak Portuguese, or even if you're from the United States, you probably already have some experience with Spanish. The cultural similarities are a lot more similar in Latin America. It's pretty chill and laid back for the most part, almost sometimes too much so. For example, if somebody tells you they're going to meet you at 2 o'clock, it might actually be 2:30 or 3 o'clock by the time they actually roll around and get to showing up. It's overall a pretty fun environment in Latin America. There's not a lot of rules. Editing Caleb here. One thing I wanted to throw in real quick, especially since I mentioned there's not a lot of rules in Latin America, is that overall Latin America is generally less safe. So if security is a concern of yours, maybe you're a solo female traveler, Southeast Asia is an area where overall I probably feel a little bit safer walking around the majority of areas. I recommend keeping your wits about you in any large city, and especially at night, but overall you're probably more likely to experience some crimes or potential mishaps in Latin America over Southeast Asia. Just a small word. Continuing. And I would say it's pretty free in a way. What I mean is that if you're going to go to Southeast Asia, especially to some countries like maybe Malaysia, you're going to encounter maybe Muslim culture where things like PDA or even hand-holding is not necessarily acceptable. And if you go to the beaches in like Vietnam or Thailand, you'll see a lot. You'll see a lot of people who are kind of covered up head to toe. You'll see some bikinis and stuff like that for sure. A lot of the times they'll be on people who are from Western countries visiting, but a lot of the locals maybe wear more covered swimsuits because they're trying to avoid the sun or various reasons. But if you go to some place like Colombia or Brazil, they're wearing really small swimsuits and they're a little bit more open with cheek kisses and stuff like this. That's how they greet hello and say goodbye. You're going to have a harder time integrating into the culture in Southeast Asia. This isn't to say you won't be able to make friends with the locals, but it might be a little bit more difficult and the language barrier might be a little bit greater. Do more research and make sure that you're not going to offend anybody by acting in the wrong way. This usually isn't as much of a problem in Latin America. If you're from Western countries, you're probably already familiar with a lot of the standards that are considered acceptable. The next thing that I want to mention real quick is the general landscapes and the things that you can see and do. So most of Southeast Asia is going to be hot and tropical. There are some pretty spectacular beaches in some areas and some pretty cool coastline, especially in Thailand has some really well-known islands that are really beautiful. If you go to some places like maybe like northern Vietnam, you can get a little bit colder weather, but overall it's going to be hot and humid in the vast majority of Southeast Asia. You can definitely find hot and tropical environments in Latin America. Most of Latin America is hot and tropical, between like Nicaragua, Guatemala, all the way down into Colombia and Brazil. But you can find a little bit more variety of landscapes. Like in Peru, you have some pretty spectacular desert. Some of the largest sand dunes in the world are actually in Peru. We went to a place called Ica and Huacachina. This is really, really cool. If you go all the way down south, we spent like a month in Ushuaia at the tip of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, and now you're going to get cold weather there. Especially in winter, you're going to see snow and the works and stuff like that. Though I do recommend visiting Tierra del Fuego in the summer, so it's just not as harsh and it's a little bit more traversable, and you have the tours that are operating in the summer. So you're going to get more of a diverse landscape in Latin America if you want to travel that region. But if all you want is beaches and sunshine, then definitely consider Southeast Asia as well. But I have to admit, I think some of the most beautiful beaches I've seen have been in places like Brazil, though Thailand has some really comparable areas, and so do some of the islands in like Philippines or Indonesia. The only other thing that I really want to get into is a bit of the cost of living. So there's some similarities overall. I would say that Southeast Asia is debatably less expensive, especially when it comes to things like food. I think I'm in Vietnam right now, like I said, and I think this is maybe the cheapest food that I have yet to see anywhere in the world. You can get a meal for like $2, maybe even $1, depending if you just go to a little street place. If you go to like, Shaylin and I went to a restaurant in the mall the other day, and I think it was like $9.50 USD with drinks. We went and got some hot pot at some little place on the street with drinks, and that was like $7.50. And you can easily feed 2 people for like $5 if you go to just like a regular street food place or some of the more basic restaurants. This is harder to do in Latin America. I feel like average meal prices in Latin America are closer to $5 per person. Though if you get something like what is called like almuerzos, which is like lunches or standard menu, you can probably feed yourself for like $3 to $4 per person, which is still a pretty good deal. A middle class restaurant in Latin America might be like $15 to $20. If you go, I think I remember we went to like TGI Fridays in Lima last year, and I think it was like $18, $19, maybe like $20 if you leave a bit of a tip. Tipping culture is also going to be different. Latin America, tipping is a little bit more common, but still not necessary. It's less common here in Southeast Asia, and honestly, if here in Vietnam and some other places, if it's a tourist area, they might expect a tip. But I've tried to tip in some of the lesser known areas here in Vietnam, and they seem very confused. So it's not necessarily expected in a lot of Southeast Asia. For things like accommodation, which is one of the biggest costs, they're pretty similar. We're renting this 2-bedroom apartment here in Vung Tau, Vietnam, on the 20th floor of a pretty modern building for about $550 USD a month. And you can find a 2-bedroom apartment in different countries for different prices, obviously, but maybe between $300 to $600 USD for a 1 or 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast Asia is pretty acceptable. You can obviously make that a little bit lower if you stay longer term, or you can make it higher if you stay in a super fancy place that is super well known. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if you're doing short-term rentals, this is all prices kind of based on like maybe 1 to 3 months and looking on places like Airbnb. You're gonna pay electricity in Southeast Asia. At least the majority of places that we've stayed now, they expect you to pay for electricity. And this can be an additional maybe 40 to 60 USD a month. I've got the air conditioner right above me going because it's hot. I think it's like 30 degrees Celsius today. It's not crazy, but with the humidity, that's pretty warm. So you're gonna probably be using the air conditioner a decent amount, and consider that that will be an additional cost onto the rental cost if you're staying monthly in a lot of these places. I was never asked to pay for electricity in renting short term in Latin America, but you can find some similar rental costs. We had a 3-bedroom in a cool little building in Ecuador for, I think, was like 450 USD a month. We had a super big, right on the beach 4-bedroom apartment in San Bartolo outside of Lima for like $600 a month. And you can usually find similar prices, maybe between 300 to 600 USD for a 2 to 3 bed. It depends. Maybe a 1 to 3 bedroom, depending on the area. Once again, if you're staying in like the most popular areas of a well-known city like Palermo and Buenos Aires, expect to pay more, obviously. Same thing goes if you stay in the most popular areas like Sukhumvit in Bangkok, you're gonna raise these prices. I recommend staying in lesser known areas just to reduce your accommodation price, whether you're staying in either region. Okay. In short, I want to summarize that I think Southeast Asia is potentially a little bit more affordable, not by too much, but maybe 10 to 20% cheaper, depending on which countries you're comparing specifically. I would argue that personally, I maybe enjoy Latin America a little bit more for friendliness and for integration. Like I said, it's usually easier for me to make friends in Latin America, and I think that people are maybe a little bit more friendly and accepting in Latin America of foreigners, and sometimes you might not even be noticed as a gringo if you're in a place like Argentina or Brazil. While if you're traveling in Southeast Asia, you're always going to be a foreigner, and it'll be pretty obvious that you're a foreigner. So I only addressed a few things. I don't want to make this video too long. You could go into a lot more detail on some specifics. If you have any questions about these areas and comparing the two, or if you think that I missed something, or if you have any thoughts, or if you think that I'm wrong about something, please tell me in the comments below. I love to have discussions on these sorts of things. I want to try to build a community to build knowledge about traveling the world in a budget-friendly and a slow way. So, like that, hit that like button and subscribe if you found this video at all useful. And until next time, guys, see you later. Bye.